After 6 months of meticulous planning, we finally made it to the airport. But at the gate, Ethan changed the script. He stood by the boarding area for New York, his brow furrowed as he checked his watch. I forgot to tell you, Sarafina and I talked it over. We think New York is a better vibe for this trip. He didn't look at me. He just tapped the face of his Rolex. There's another flight to JFK in an hour. You have time to book a seat if you hurry. I stared at him, a sudden suffocating lump forming in my throat. This trip to Miami was supposed to be our milestone, my dream vacation, and he had gone behind my back to let my best friend rewrite it. Serafina stood beside him, offering a sympathetic, sugary smile. Summer, don't be mad. You were so busy with the Madison account last month. That Ethan and I just ended up going to Miami without you. I've seen the city. Honestly, it's overrated. Not much to do. She gave me a playful, sisterly wink. Ethan caught her eye and a small, innocent smile touched his lips. Then, he turned his frown back to me. You're the one who insisted on a vacation, he said, his voice laced with the irritation he always reserved for me. Change your ticket and get on the New York flight, or don't. But I'm not waiting around. I watched them walk through the gate together, their silhouettes blending perfectly. I looked down at my ticket for Miami. It was crumpled, the edges white from where my grip had tightened. The intercom crackled to life. Final boarding call for Flight 1004 to Miami. All remaining passengers, please proceed to Gate B12. I didn't hesitate. I turned my back on the New York gate and walked toward Miami. I wasn't waiting anymore. This time, I was the one leaving. 5 minutes earlier, Ethan's fingers had been tapping rhythmically against his suitcase handle, the telltale sign of his growing impatience. I had suppressed the bitterness in my chest to ask a simple question. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I had spent half a year on this. I had sent him links to the best beach clubs, the hidden seafood spots, the galleries. He had always responded with a distracted sure. Whatever you think is best. I thought he was trusting my taste. I didn't realize he just wasn't listening. Ethan's scowl deepened at my question. Why does it need a why? I had a window of time last month, and Serafina had just closed that massive contract. You were buried in overtime. We couldn't just sit around waiting for you forever. Could we? He adjusted his collar. Consider it a favor. I took her out to celebrate. So you wouldn't feel guilty about missing her. Big win. The big win. I knew that contract. I was the one who had stayed up until 3 a.m. 3 nights in a row fixing her projections, drafting the pitch and sourcing the vendors. Because she wasn't quite sure how to close yet. Even the overtime Ethan mentioned, that was me finishing the back-end paperwork for Serafina, so she could go home early. I remembered her leaning her head on my shoulder that night, smelling like expensive lilies. Summer, you're a lifesaver. I'm still such a mess with the technical stuff. I only feel safe if you're the one doing the final check. I had smiled and told her it was fine. She was my best friend. I didn't mind looking out for her. Now I realized she wasn't resting at home while I worked. She was on a beach with my boyfriend. Serafina had put a hand on my arm at the airport. Summer, I know you won't let such a tiny thing ruin the mood. Ethan and I will be waiting for you in the city. I'll keep a close eye on him for you. Make sure he doesn't get into any trouble in Manhattan. Ethan had chuckled at that, his face softening in a way it never did for me. Forget it, Sarah. Why bother explaining? We're going to miss the flight. He had grabbed his bag and effortlessly took hers too, trailing after her like a loyal shadow. No apology, no. Are you okay? No second glance. I watched them walk away, and for the first time I saw how well they fit together. There was no room for me in that picture. Exhaustion hit me then, not just from work, but from the 5-year marathon of trying to be enough for a man who was already looking past me. The intercom called for Miami one last time. I looked at the crowd moving toward their own destinations, their own lives. I realized I could see a beautiful view on my own. The sun was setting by the time I landed in Miami. After checking into the hotel, I took a car to Laser, the restaurant Ethan had mentioned once. He'd said it was impossible to book and too much effort, so I'd taken it as a challenge. I had secured a reservation 6 months in advance. But when I gave my name to the host, he paused, a confused smile on his face. Miss Miller, yes, we have your reservation on file, but it was fulfilled last month. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I'm sorry, I wasn't in Miami last month. The manager tapped his tablet, his eyes flickering with a memory. Oh, I remember that night. A Mr. Ethan Miller. He came in with a young lady. He had the confirmation text on his phone. He leaned in slightly. We usually don't take early arrivals, but he told us it was their anniversary. A very special occasion. We even had the chef prepare a custom cake. Anniversary. The word hit me like a physical blow. They had celebrated their anniversary in the restaurant I had booked for us. Reservation I had spent months securing. The one I had dreamed of sharing with him had been stolen and repurposed for her. He gestured toward the restaurant celebration wall, a digital display of happy guests. See, there they are. I followed his finger. There was Ethan. He was laughing, a smear of chocolate frosting on his cheek. Serafina was leaning into him, her eyes bright with triumph. He looked at her with a raw, unprotected adoration I hadn't seen in years. When I had accidentally smeared cake on him during my last birthday, he had wiped it off with a cold, disgusted look. Summer, don't be childish. This suit is Italian silk. And honestly, at your age, you should know better. At your age. I had swallowed that insult too. I had told myself he was just a serious man who didn't like mess. I thought he had outgrown cute moments. Now I saw that he just didn't want them with me. He didn't want to laugh with me. He didn't want to be silly with me. He wanted to be adored by me from a distance at his convenience. And with Serafina, he was a completely different person, playful, warm, utterly smitten. The manager noticed my face. Miss Miller, are you all right? We truly can't fit you in tonight. The books are closed. Perhaps another time. I blinked back the stinging in my eyes and gave him a small, empty smile. No. Another time won't be necessary. I walked out into a sudden tropical downpour. The wind was fierce, but I barely felt it. As I stood on the sidewalk drenched, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I thought it might be Ethan. It wasn't. It was an Instagram notification. Sarafina had posted a story. It was a photo of a late-night diner in New York. She and Ethan were eating greasy burgers, the kind of lowbrow food Ethan always mocked when I suggested it. The final slide was a photo of their glasses clinking. Just the two of us. The best things in life are unplanned. I stared at the screen. Not a single text from Ethan. He hadn't asked if I landed. He hadn't asked why I wasn't in New York. To him, I simply didn't exist unless I was there to serve a purpose. I looked at my own reflection in the dark phone screen. Red eyes, wet hair, a total mess. The last shred of hope in my chest finally flickered out. I tapped the like button on her post and left a comment. I hope you and Ethan have the time of your lives. You deserve each other. My phone rang within 30 seconds. It was Ethan Summer. What the hell is wrong with you? His voice barked. The moment I answered that comment you left on Serafina's post. Do you have any idea how that looks? People are going to get the wrong idea. He sounded so righteous, so genuinely offended on her behalf. Did I say something untrue, Ethan? I asked. My voice is cold as the rain. Are you not having fun? Is she not your preferred company? The line went quiet for a beat. I had never spoken back to him. I was the stable one, the understanding one. Delete the comment, Summer, now, he hissed. And where the hell are you? Get to the hotel in Manhattan and apologize to her. She's crying because of you. I think I'll leave you to your unplanned evening. I said. You seem much happier without me, Summer. You're being slow, he snapped, his guilt turning into aggression. We couldn't just starve. Because you were taking forever to get your act together. You're an adult. Take responsibility for your own timing. We can't all cater to you. Besides, you were the one who told me to look after Serafina. When she moved here, that was the knife in the heart. When Serafina joined our firm, she knew no one. I had mentored her. I had asked Ethan to help her network. I had literally handed him the leash. And he had used it to walk away from me. Ethan, I said, my voice finally steady. We're done. Don't call me again. I hung up. I didn't wait. I blocked them both. Phone, social media, everything. The rain stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving behind a vibrant neon orange sunset over the Atlantic. I took a deep breath. The weight that had been crushing my chest for 5 years was gone. I spent the next 2 days following my own itinerary. I went to the galleries. I sat on the beach. And I realized that the scenery is much better when you aren't looking at it through someone else's shadow. I took photos of the sunsets, the waves, the street performers. And in every single one, I was smiling. A real smile, not the forced, accommodating one I'd worn for 5 years. When I returned to the office on Monday, Ethan was already waiting at my desk. He looked disheveled, his face dark with fury. Summer, you blocked me over dinner. I sat down calmly and opened my laptop. We broke up, Ethan. There's no reason for us to be in contact. He let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Are you still doing this? Are you really this petty? We didn't wait for you, for one meal. And you're throwing away 5 years. Serafina is your best friend. How can you be this small-minded? I'm at work, Ethan. Please don't disturb me. The office went quiet. People were starting to stare. Everyone had seen Sarafina's post. The office group chats had been buzzing about it all weekend. Ethan's face turned a deep, humiliated red as he realized he was becoming the subject of the very gossip he hated. "You're going to regret this, Summer," he spat before storming off. I didn't look up. I just typed 3 words at the top of a fresh document: letter of resignation. For years, I had stayed at this mid-sized firm because of Ethan. I had sacrificed promotions, turned down headhunters, and even moved into a support role because he said he wanted me to focus on the family. We'll have one day. I had given him everything. I had given him my clients, my time, my youth. And for what? So he could climb the ladder using my work, while I stood in the shadows, playing the role of the supportive girlfriend. While I was playing support, he was using my leads and my hard work to climb the ladder. I had given Serafina my best clients because she was struggling. No more. I walked the letter to human resources. When I got back to my desk, a colleague leaned over Summer. "Check the internal forum. Ethan is losing his mind." I opened the company's anonymous board. The top post was titled, "The Truth About Summer Miller Sabotaging Colleagues Out of Jealousy." The post was a hit piece written by Ethan. He claimed I was harassing Serafina because I was jealous of her performance, because he was the golden boy of the firm. People were actually buying it. The comments were toxic. I knew she was a snake. She's been here forever and still acts like a gatekeeper. Typical mean girl behavior. Just because she's been here longer doesn't mean she owns the clients. I felt a surge of cold fury. I was leaving, but I wasn't leaving with my reputation intact. Serafina walked toward me then, her eyes red and puffy, the perfect image of a victim. "Summer, please. Why are you doing this? I thought we were sisters. How can you doubt me?" And Ethan. Ethan pushed his way to her side, grabbing my wrist. I didn't pull my wrist away with a dramatic flourish. I didn't shout, nor did I flinch. Instead, I looked down at Ethan's fingers, his knuckles taut, the heavy band of his platinum watch biting into the flesh above his cuff. And then I looked up, into his eyes. My expression was entirely devoid of heat. It was the same look I gave the printer when it jammed for the 4th time in afternoon. Mild, detached inconvenience. "You have 3 seconds to remove your hand, Ethan," I said, my voice barely carrying above the low hum of the open floor plan, yet distinct enough that 2 senior associates at the nearby pod froze mid-keystroke. "If you don't, I won't. Call HR. I will call building security, file an incident report for physical harassment on corporate property, and notify the managing director that you're creating an unsanctioned legal liability on the floor." Ethan's thumb twitched. His jaw tightened so hard I heard the faint click of his molars. For a fraction of a second, vanity fought with instinct. Vanity told him to assert dominance, to prove to the gathering audience that he owned the room, as he had for 5 years. But instinct, the cold, calculating cowardice that dictated his every move, reminded him that Arthur Vance, the firm's senior managing partner, had an office 40 feet away with clear glass walls. Ethan let go. He did it with a contemptuous flick of his wrist, as if he were discarding something soiled. "Don't flatter yourself, Summer," he muttered, stepping back, though his ears were burning a dark, violent crimson. "I'm trying to save you from ruining your own career over an emotional meltdown." Beside him, Serafina made a small, choked sound, a practiced, melodramatic gasp that drew eyes from 3 rows down. She stepped in front of Ethan, her hands clasped against her chest, her eyes glossy, with unshed tears. "Summer, please," she whispered, her voice carrying that terrible, sugary cadence that had once fooled me into thinking she was delicate. "Look around. You're making a scene. We came over here to offer you an olive branch. Ethan was just trying to protect me because of that awful, spiteful comment you left. If you're upset about the Miami booking, I can pay you back for the hotel. Just please don't turn the whole office against us." It was a masterclass in manipulation. In 2 sentences, she had framed herself as the generous victim, Ethan as the protective hero, and me as the unhinged, greedy ex-girlfriend bringing personal vendettas into the workplace. Around us, the whispers started. I saw Chloe from marketing lean over to, whispering into an intern's ear. I saw Marcus, one of Ethan's golf buddies, shake his head with a quiet sneer. I looked at Serafina, really looked at her. She was wearing the silk blouse I had picked out for her during her first week. The one I'd bought her with my own discount code because she claimed she couldn't afford a professional wardrobe on an entry-level salary. She was wearing the Cartier-style bangle Ethan had bought her during their secret getaway, The one he'd claimed was a client appreciation gift on the company card. Serafina, I said, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. The Madison account deck. She blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. What? The Madison account pitch deck, I repeated, standing up and pulling my blazer over my shoulders. The master key for the financial models is stored on my private drive. The presentation to Arthur Vance and the Madison board is at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. You took credit for the account last month when Ethan took you to celebrate. So I assume you have the technical architecture and the revised Q3 projections ready to present. A flicker of panic, sharp, genuine, and unscripted, flitted across Sarafina's face. She cast a desperate glance at Ethan. Ethan's chest puffed out. Don't intimidate her, Summer. The Madison account is firm property. You'll hand over the files before you leave today, or HR will withhold your severance. I don't have a severance, Ethan, I said softly, taking my designer tote from the bottom drawer of my desk. I resigned, effective immediately. I reached into my bag, pulled out a stark white envelope, and laid it flat on the desk, right next to my mechanical keyboard. And as for the master files, they aren't on the firm's shared server. They are on my personal encrypted drive, built on custom macros I authored under my own copyright prior to my employment here. Per my contract clause 14B, proprietary tools developed prior to onboarding remain the sole property of the creator, unless explicitly licensed. I leaned in just enough so that only the two of them could hear me. Good luck presenting tomorrow, Serafina. I hear Mr. Vance has a low tolerance for people who can't explain the logic behind their own numbers. I didn't wait for a response. I picked up my box, containing 5 years of my life reduced to a sleek brass desk clock, a potted succulent, and a stack of leather notebooks, and walked toward the elevator bank. Behind me, the silence was absolute. The elevator ride down to the lobby was 30 floors of quiet revelation. For 5 years, I had believed that love was synonymous with endurance. I had convinced myself that Ethan's sharpness was just ambition, that his coldness was efficiency, and that my constant compromises were the investment required to build a life together. I had erased my own light so he could shine brighter, comforting myself with the lie that once he reached the top, he would pull me up beside him. When the elevator doors opened into the sunlit marble lobby, the humid summer air hit me through the automatic doors. It didn't feel heavy, it felt clean. My phone buzzed in my hand. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't Serafina. It was an email notification from the firm's HR automated system. Exit interview. Acknowledgement and compliance notice. Attached was a copy of the hit piece thread Ethan had posted on the internal employee message board, flagged by system administrators for review. I pulled up to a bench in the courtyard, set my box on my lap, and opened the attachment. Ethan had been thorough in his malice. The post accused me of gross unprofessionalism, unauthorized withholding of client assets, and systemic harassment of junior staff due to personal romantic grievances. He had crafted a narrative wherein he was the noble executive attempting to end a toxic relationship, and I was the bitter, unhinged woman trying to destroy the firm on my way out. I didn't cry. The tears had been burned out of me under the Miami downpour 3 nights ago. Instead, I opened my personal cloud drive. Over 5 years, I hadn't just done the work, I had saved the metadata. Every 3 a.m. edit on Sarafina's decks carried a digital timestamp, an IP signature tied to my home network, and a revision history showing her original files, riddled with fundamental mathematical errors, overwritten by my corrections. Every client pitch Ethan had presented to the board had a hidden commit log showing that 90% of the executive summaries were drafted for my user profile while he was logged in at local steakhouses or country clubs. I drafted a brief, formal email to Arthur Vance, Senior Managing Partner, Evelyn Reed, Head of Human Resources, General Counsel. Subject: Response to defamatory internal post/IP. Clarification and compliance record. Attached were 47 PDF pages of precise, chronological evidence. I didn't add emotional commentary. I didn't call Ethan a liar. I didn't call Serafina a thief. I simply laid out the timeline. 1. Document creation dates versus performance evaluation entries. 2. IP logs proving I worked 40 hours of unpaid overtime on accounts assigned to Serafina while she was out of office, cross-referenced with her public social media posts. 3. The server logs showing that Ethan had used his administrator privileges to access my personal work folder at 11:14 p.m. last night, attempting to download my proprietary macros without authorization and failing due to two-factor authentication. I hit send. As the status bar filled and emptied, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a private number. I answered. Summer Miller. Summer. A deep, smooth voice came through the speaker, accompanied by the quiet ambient clatter of a high-end restaurant. I was wondering how long it would take you to realize you were working in a kindergarten. I paused, recognizing the voice instantly. Julian Reed. Julian was the founder and CEO of Vanguard Strategic, the premier boutique consultancy firm in the city, and our firm's fiercest, most lethal competitor. 6 months ago, Julian had tried to headhunt me over a discreet lunch, offering me a director position with twice my current salary. At the time, I had turned him down because Ethan had begged me not to leave, claiming that joining Vanguard would hurt his reputation and ruin our plans for a shared future. Julian, I said, leaning back against the cool stone of the bench. News.
Treibel's fast.
News. Julian let out a low, musical chuckle. My dear, half your firm's senior clients are currently texting me because they heard you walked out 20 minutes ago. I've already received 2 calls from account managers asking if I have room for their business if you come to work for me. I took a slow breath. I just left 30 minutes ago, Julian. I haven't even made it to the subway. Good, Julian said, his voice turning sharp with sharp, professional precision. Then turn around, walk 3 blocks south to the St. Regis and join me for lunch. My assistant has already prepared your contract. Director of Strategy, unlimited expense account, and complete autonomy over your team. And Summer? Yes, you can bring whichever clients you deem worthy. The rest can stay with Ethan. While I sat in the dim, velvet-lined dining room of the St. Regis sipping a crisp chablis across from Julian Reed, 3 blocks away, the 5th floor of my former firm was devolving into chaos. I knew this because my former desk neighbor, Maya, the only person in that office who hadn't fallen for Sarafina's doe-eyed routine, was live texting me updates. Under her desk, Maya 11:42 a.m. Vance just called Ethan into his office. Glass walls are a mistake, Summer. We can see Vance shouting. Ethan's face is white as a sheet. Maya 11:58 a.m. Serafina is frantically trying to open the Madison deck on your old desktop. She realized you changed the local admin password when you handed in your badge. She's literally sweating through her silk blouse. Maya, 12:15 p.m. HR just swept in. Evelyn personally shut down Ethan's internal board post. They sent an all-hands compliance email warning against unsubstantiated defamation on internal servers. Everyone is whispering, Ethan, looks like he's going to throw up. I smiled faintly, set my phone face down on the tablecloth, and looked at Julian. The Madison account, I said thoughtfully. They have their annual contract. Renewal tomorrow at 9. Julian cut into his steak with precise elegance.
Yes.
Madison Logistics.
A
$40 million account. Arthur Vance's crown jewel. If they walk, you're old. Firm loses 30% of its quarterly revenue. They will walk, I said calmly. Not because I'm bitter, but because Serafina doesn't know that Madison CFO, Richard Henderson, hates corporate jargon.
She
built her entire pitch around fluffy marketing concepts. I spent 3 months restructuring their supply chain tax model using a custom algorithmic framework. Without that framework, their projected margins fall apart by 6%. Julian paused, setting his knife down. His silver-gray eyes locked onto mine with intense appreciation. And where is that framework stored, Summer? On a flash drive in my blazer pocket, I replied, along with the proposal that could save Madison 8% instead of 6% if implemented by a firm with actual technical competence. Julian's lips curved into a slow, devastating smile. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a fountain pen, and slid a thick document across the white linen. Welcome to Vanguard, Senior Vice President Miller. Let's go take Arthur Vance's crown jewel. That evening, I checked into a sunlit loft apartment downtown, a place I had rented using the funds I had originally saved for the wedding Ethan and I were supposed to plan. For 5 years, Ethan had controlled our living arrangements. We had lived in his apartment, surrounded by his minimalist leather furniture, his golf trophies, and his taste in modern art that felt cold and sterile. I had lived like a guest in my own life, constantly walking on eggshells so as not to disrupt his aesthetic or his mood. Now, as I unboxed my few possessions in a space that smelled of cedar and rain, my phone began to vibrate violently on the counter. It was an unblocked number. I picked it up, expecting Ethan's anger. Instead, I heard a voice I hadn't expected. Summer? It was Serafina. Her voice was stripped of its sugary charm. It was raw, frantic, and breathless. Summer, you have to answer me. Please. You can't do this to me. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the streetlights flicker on, across the skyline. I didn't do anything to you, Sarafina. You took what you wanted. You took the trip, you took the credit, and you took Ethan. You should be celebrating. Summer, please, she cried, dropping the facade entirely. Arthur Vance brought in an IT forensic team this afternoon. They tracked the edit history on all my previous submissions. They know I didn't write the tax integration modules. Vance told me that if I can't deliver the Madison pitch tomorrow morning, I'm fired, and they're reviewing my hiring credentials for fraud. Then I suggest you start studying, I said, my voice entirely devoid of pity. You have about 12 hours. You ruined my life, she suddenly shrieked, her terror curdling into rage.
You
did this on purpose. You set me up. You knew I couldn't handle the Madison account. You gave it to me so I would fail. I didn't give it to you, Serafina, I reminded her coldly. You sat at the gate to New York, wiggled your wrist, and told me you were better suited for my life than I was. You wanted my job, my boyfriend, and my hard work. You just didn't realize that my work was the only thing keeping either of you relevant. Ethan hates you, she spat, weeping messily now. He told me you were boring. He told me sex with you felt like a corporate performance evaluation. He said he only stayed with you because you were useful. The words were meant to wound, to inflict a bloody tear in my armor. 6 months ago, they would have broken me into pieces. But now, after the rain in Miami, after watching him wipe cake off his face with a look of childish adoration for a girl who is currently drowning, the words felt pathetic. If I was so boring, I said softly, why is he standing in the hallway outside my new apartment right now? There was a sudden, sharp silence on the line. What? Serafina whispered. I looked down at the street-level monitor of my building's intercom system. Ethan's disheveled figure was visible on the camera, his tie loosened, his hair messy, frantically pressing the buzzers. Good night, Serafina, I said and disconnected the call. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I didn't invite him up. I had no intention of allowing his toxicity into my new sanctuary. When the glass door unlocked, Ethan pushed his way through, smelling faintly of scotch and cheap cologne. The smooth, arrogant man who had tapped his Rolex at the airport gate 3 days ago was gone. In his place was a man unraveling at the seams. Summer, he breathed, stepping toward me with outstretched arms. Thank God. You didn't block this building's intercom. Summer, we need to talk. This whole thing, it's gotten completely out of hand. I stood 5 feet away, my arms crossed, watching him with the cool detachment of an observer watching an accident unfold in slow motion. You shouldn't be here, Ethan. I had to come, he said, his voice rising, cracked with desperate emotion. Vance is losing his mind. He suspended me pending an HR investigation because of that stupid internal board post. He thinks I created a toxic work environment. And the Madison pitch, Summer, Richard Henderson called Vance an hour ago and said he heard rumors that you left. He threatened to cancel the meeting tomorrow. He didn't threaten, I corrected gently. He did cancel it, with your firm at least. Ethan froze. His blue eyes widened, bloodshot and frantic. What are you talking
about?
I signed with Vanguard 3 hours ago, Ethan, as senior vice president. The color drained from his face so fast he looked almost gray in the ambient lighting of the lobby. Vanguard? Julian Reed? Summer, no. You can't work for Reed. He's our direct rival. That's a violation of your non-compete. I never signed a non-compete, I said, offering a small, sad smile at his ignorance. You told me 3 years ago that non-competes were a formality for junior staff and that I didn't need one because I'd be a partner soon. You never updated my contract paperwork because you were too lazy to submit the HR files. Remember? Ethan stumbled back a step, knocking his shoulder against the lobby column. Summer. He whimpered, his arrogance entirely shattered. He dropped to his knees right there on the polished terrazzo floor, reaching out to grasp the hem of my jeans. Summer, please. Look at me. We were together for 5 years.
5
Years. You can't throw that away because of a mistake. Miami was a mistake. Serafina was a mistake. She manipulated me, Summer. She came on to me when I was stressed about work. She's the one who wanted to go to New York. It was sickening. The man who had walked through the gate trailing behind her, like a shadow, who had snapped at me and told me to apologize to her while she cried over burgers, was now throwing her into the fire without a second thought, to save his own skin. Get up, Ethan, I said softly. You're embarrassing yourself. I'll fire her, Ethan cried, looking up at me with tears springing to his eyes. Tears of pure self-pity. I'll fire Serafina tomorrow morning. I'll tell Vance it was all her fault. I'll give you total credit for the Madison account. We can buy that house in the suburbs you wanted. We can get married next summer. Just come back to the firm. Fix the Madison deck. Save me, Summer. Please. I looked down at him. This man I had once believed was my entire world. I looked at his trembling hands, his desperate, manipulative eyes, and the hollow shell of a man who had only ever loved what I could do for him, never who I was. I spent 5 years saving you, Ethan, I said, my voice as steady as granite. I saved your presentations. I saved your reputation. I saved your career.
But I
realized something standing in the rain in Miami. I leaned down slightly, meeting his terrified gaze. You aren't worth saving. And I'm finally saved from you. I turned my back on him, walked into the elevator, and pressed the button for my
floor.
As the brass doors closed, I saw him sitting on the floor, his head in his hands, completely alone in the cold glare of the lights. The next morning, the boardroom at Vanguard Strategic on the 45th floor of the Trade Center was bathed in blinding, golden sunlight. I stood at the head of the dark mahogany table, wearing a tailored charcoal suit, my hair pinned back with silver clips. Beside me sat Julian Reed, sipping black coffee, looking entirely relaxed. Across from us sat Richard Henderson, the formidable CFO of Madison Logistics, along with his entire executive committee. On the large wall screen behind me was the completed, interactive financial model I had spent 6 months developing, now fully operational, streamlined, and bearing the official seal of Vanguard Strategic. And as you can see, Mr. Henderson, I said, pressing a button on the laser pointer, highlighting a blue vector curve on the screen, by shifting your distribution node to the Eastern Corridor and integrating our proprietary real-time tax algorithm, your quarterly operational cost drops by 8.4%, 2% higher than our initial estimates. Richard Henderson leaned forward, resting his heavy elbows on the table. He inspected the numbers with the sharp, ruthless eye of a man who managed billions. For 3 minutes, the room was deathly quiet. Then, Henderson let out a long, low whistle and set his glasses down. Unbelievable, he said, looking at me with genuine respect. When Arthur Vance called me this morning begging for another chance, he assured me his team, specifically that young man Ethan and his associate, had crafted this model. But when I asked Ethan to explain why the East Corridor yielded a higher tax credit, he couldn't even give me the basic formula. Because he didn't write it, Julian Reed said smoothly, crossing his legs. Summer did, entirely by herself. I know, Henderson grunted, a contemptuous smile touching his lips. I could hear that girl Serafina crying in the background while Vance was on
speakerphone.
It was an embarrassment, a complete circus. Henderson stood up and extended his large, calloused hand across the table toward me. Miss Miller, Madison Logistics is officially pulling its account from your former firm. As of today, Vanguard is our exclusive strategic partner.
And I
want you, personally, as the lead project director on this account. I took his hand and shook it firmly. It will be an honor, Mr. Henderson. The news of Madison Logistics breaking its contract broke over the industry like a thunderclap by noon. By 2 p.m., my old firm released an emergency press release announcing internal restructuring. Translation: Arthur Vance was performing a corporate purge to stem the hemorrhage of dying investor confidence. Through Maya's texts, I watched the final curtain fall. Maya, 2:15 p.m. It's over. Vance fired Ethan on the spot after Henderson's legal team formally terminated the contract. He was escorted out of the building by security. He didn't even get to pack his desk. They put his stuff in plastic trash bags. Maya, 2:30 p.m. Serafina broke down in tears in the middle of the lobby, screaming that Ethan ruined her career. Ethan screamed back at her that she was a useless parasite who dragged him down. They were practically clawing at each other in front of the front desk until security pushed them out into the street. Maya, 2:45 p.m. Word is, HR is opening a formal fraud investigation into Sarafina's resume credentials. She's blacklisted from every major agency in the
City.
and Ethan's license review is being flagged by the ethics board. I read the texts quietly while sitting in my new, spacious office overlooking the harbor. I didn't feel a surge of wild euphoria. I didn't feel a bitter sense of vengeful
Delight.
What I felt was a profound, quiet stillness, the kind of peace that comes when a storm finally clears, leaving the air sharp and clean. They hadn't been destroyed by my revenge. They had been destroyed by their own nature.
I had
Simply stepped out of the way and stopped holding up the crumbling walls of their vanity. 3 months later, the ocean breeze in South Beach was warm and carried the clean, salty scent of the open Atlantic. The palms swayed rhythmically under a sky painted in violent hues of pink, magenta, and liquid gold. I sat at an outdoor table at Laser, the high-end restaurant I had booked 6 months ago, the one Ethan had stolen to celebrate an anniversary with another woman. When I called him 2 weeks ago under my new title as SVP of Vanguard, the host had recognized my name immediately. He had apologized profusely for the previous mix-up, clearing out the best table on the private terrace overlooking the ocean, complete with a bottle of Dom Perignon on the house. I wasn't alone. Sitting across from me was a notebook, an iPad displaying my new firm's expanding roster of international clients, and a clear glass of chilled wine.
I
Had invited myself on this trip. No timelines, no compromise, no waiting for a man who tapped his watch and made me feel like an intrusion in my own life. My phone buzzed on the linen table. It was an email from an unknown sender. I opened it. It was from Ethan. He was writing from a generic personal account. The text was long, rambling, and
desperate.
he told me he was currently working as a mid-level contractor at a small, low-tier firm in Ohio. He told me Serafina had left him weeks ago after trying to sue him for unpaid expenses. He told me he couldn't sleep, that every time he closed his eyes, he saw me walking away at the gate to Miami. Summer, please, the email read. Just give me 5 minutes. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm living in a tiny apartment, and I have nothing left. Please, just tell me you forgive me. I looked at the screen for a long moment. 5 years ago, 3 months ago, even a part of me might have felt a twinge of lingering pain, a ghost of the girl who had stayed up until 3 a.m. fixing his mistakes just to earn a cold nod of approval.
Now?
I felt nothing at all. I didn't reply. I didn't send a bitter retort. I didn't even hit save. I simply tapped the menu, clicked block and delete, and placed the phone face down. On the table, the waiter arrived, carrying a small, perfectly crafted white chocolate dessert, decorated with edible gold leaf and fresh berries. Compliments of the chef, Miss Miller. The waiter smiled warmly. For your celebration tonight. I looked at the glowing sunset reflecting off the quiet waves, took a small bite of the cake, and smiled. A real, effortless, radiant smile that reached all the way to my eyes. Thank you, I said softly, raising my glass to the horizon. It really is a beautiful view.